I thought maybe it was good if we talk about something else. A lot of the time, just gotta fix my jacket. A lot of the time in these videos, I talk about, we get right down to business. If anybody's been watching my videos, I get right down to business. We get into some very heavy discussions, some very controversial topics, exotic ideas, and wild experiences and theories. And I don't do a lot of what most other speakers or podcasters do. Is get into the administrative stuff and to review stuff you've already done. You know, if you look at a lot of the people in this business, they often just review stuff. I did this, I was there. We talked about this, we talked about that, and this has changed. And like they just cover so many topics just to reinvigorate their preeminence. Whereas I've never gone into my accomplishments or things I got right or wrong. I don't dwell on a lot of stuff, but today I thought we're going to talk about, if you've seen my videos, I have the channel and I talk about a lot of stuff, and I'm Canadian, from Canada. And in Canada, especially at the time 20 years ago, even today, there's no Canadian who's going to stick their neck out publicly and talk about aliens. In the US, it's very different. It's a much larger population. People in the US, Americans, are more forward-thinking. There's a lot more information. They're more progressive. Americans are more progressive, pioneering in this respect. Canadians are not. We're very conservative. So when I started talking about this 16 years ago, it wasn't, you know, in a lot of cases in Canada, you speak in your small groups. In your home, in your basement, or in your network of friends, even online, but it's within that network. I took a different approach and I went public. So I'm making these public, sharing my wild theories and experiences publicly, talking about ETs and star beings, spaceships, which now, with the congressional hearings in the U.S., with this information now becoming more public, reaching the Congress and politicians who are getting access to classified information that substantiate what many people in this industry have been saying. And that's nice to see. It's nice to see. But 20 years ago, we didn't have that. And so it wasn't good for my life, my reputation, to come out and talk about this. But because of my experiences and my knowledge and my relationship, you know, with these advanced cultures, I started talking about it. And then I made other discoveries. If you look at the synthetic humans, you know, if you look at other theories, there's so much to talk about. Now, I didn't get, again, I'm not saying it's because I'm Canadian, but I didn't get invited to any interviews, right? I didn't get invited to any podcast. And back then, all you had is radio. You couldn't talk about this on a podcast. You can't talk about extraterrestrials. You had to go to radio. And I've said before, I contacted the radio, Coast to Coast AM, and I said, I'd like to come on. And they just said, you're a nobody. Right? They said, again, you're a nobody. Do you have a book? I didn't have a book. Are you a scientist? No. Do you have a PhD? No. Because everybody there had a PhD or a scientist, or they were a whistleblower, or they were a former, intelligence officer, or their father was in the CIA, or they have numerous books, or they're an archaeologist. So it was understandable. But the years passed on, and eventually I was contacted by Richard Hoagland, who is a scientist. He's one of these exotic scientists who talks about the fake moon landings and the objects on Mars, and he talked about the 9/11 attacks. So he's willing, as a scientist, he's willing to go to these areas, and he has a huge background with NASA, and he's got all kinds of contacts. He's very intelligent. He was used to be on the radio a lot, and then he started his own online show. I don't know if you call it a podcast, but the show Enterprise Mission. And so Mr. Hoagland contacted me, and he was the first. I understand he was the first. And I'd never done any radio. I've never done any interview. I make these personal videos. In the personal video, nobody questions you, right? Nobody asks you questions. Nobody critiques. Online, they just call you names, and you respond, "How dare you!" So he contacted me, and I said to myself, well, I respected him. Again, he's pioneering. He talks about extraterrestrials, but he relies on science as much as possible. And he trusted sources, trusted speakers. In this business, in the UFO business, it's rife with fraudulent experts, undercover intelligence officers, right? People who make up information, or they're trolls, or they're just out to spread disinformation. But not only that, there are these organizations that also can manipulate others to talk about fake information, like the Pleiadian stuff. So they might not be, I'm not saying those are intelligence, but intelligence feeds those people, and those people go on to say, the Pleiadians told me this, and the Pleiadians told me that, and I've talked about the Pleiadians. I think it's a fabrication, it's a fake. They're fake aliens. Whether 60 years ago a spaceship came through the Pleiades and then landed here and met some people and says, where did you come from? Well, we came from the Pleiades, meaning maybe they came through the Pleiades. Whether that happened, I don't know. But at some point, the intelligence, right, the people who met these people or communicated with them said, okay, we're going to call them the Pleiadians. But that was, let's say, 60 years ago, when we didn't have social media, we didn't have internet, we didn't have mobile phones, we barely had a computer. So the intelligence or the armies just referred to them as Pleiadians, and that was that. But what happened was, when intelligence wants to open up a psychological operation, they're going to say, well, what can we do? Well, we can use these Pleiadians, and we'll just develop the story, and then we'll use that. So they're basing it on some facts, but then they're making up the rest. One thing is true. I know I wanted to get into this interview, but one thing is true about intelligence. They have very limited creative ability. They're very strategic, and they're intelligent, and they got lots of information, but they're not creative. So if you understand, if you have good knowledge of what is an advanced culture or a cosmic culture, and then you get this created culture by the intelligence, like the Pleiadians or the Arcturians or the Orions, the cultures, they're not developed properly. They don't have all of the when you develop a character, you got to have the right background and the right tonality and the right message and the right planets and the right all this. They don't have all that. Now, if you don't understand, if you know nothing, Arcturian sounds great. But if you know something, if you've met actual intelligent off-planet cultures, you can see through the holes, right? They don't make sense. So what happens is, when disinformation enters, it's a bad thing, and not everybody can spot it. And sometimes they'll mix disinformation with factual information, and it's hard to separate. Well, this person knows about this subject, ancient archaeology, but then he's talking about, the Anunnaki. So you tolerate, there's a huge, in the beginning it was a huge tolerance for this variation, because that's all you get. And then people chose to believe whatever they wanted to believe. So I guess why I provide that background is because, Hoagland, he's very smart. He's got lots of sources. He knows a lot of the fake stuff and the fake operatives, even if he doesn't name them. So when he invited me, I was excited. He asked me by email. He says, "Well, what do you want to talk about?" And I said, "Okay, well, let me think about it." He says, "Okay, you write me your planned proposal so that I can have a look at it." And so I did all this research. There were a number of things I wanted to talk about. Again, this is my first interview. I want to make sure I get it right. There's a number of things I want to talk about, but I don't want to talk about the blatant stuff. I want to talk about. I wanted to talk about things where I could show in examples and some television and film properties. I can show some other aspects of the visitations, or what are they here for? What are they doing? And anyway, I did a lot of research, and I sent him the proposal. He says fine, and we booked a date. Now I prepared for that interview for about 20 hours. I got images, I got the program dates, again, he's a very he has a very high expectation. He wants details, dates, programs, various clips, dialogue, images, and I had it all set up. And I sent him all that information. And then I had all my notes ready. And then we had the day come on. Now this is my first interview. And he starts asking basic questions. And then he talks about this experience I had back in 2005 with the what I referred to as the elves. I call them the elves. Some people think of them as the what do you call them? Those who live, the civilization that lives inside the earth. To me, they're the elves. I refer to them as the elves. Or some people refer to them as the Anshar. The Anshar. This is much later. This is later. And I met them. I first was contacted by them in 2005. They came to my apartment. They appeared through a portal in my apartment. And they visited. They came 3 times. And that's what started this whole thing. They said, you know, you have to do this, you have to do that. And we have things to tell you. They would say things like, we want to communicate with you, but we can't because you've got certain blocks. And I've talked about this in videos that many people are hobbled. That when you're born, you're spiritually hobbled on purpose, such that you are able to experience your youth and your adolescence and your young adulthood without having access to mass amount of information and being contacted by all kind of advanced beings. Now, in some people don't have that hobble, or that gets disabled, or it doesn't work properly, and then they have these wild experiences. And so some of that is modulated. Each person is different, so I don't know what people's plan is. But every life is different, and you have a different path. But in my case, I was one that prior to 2005, there was absolutely, prior to 2005, I knew nothing about extraterrestrials. I've had no interest in even alien movies, really. I hadn't even watched Star Wars. Which was the big, I think I saw Empire Strikes Back, but I never saw the original Star Wars. I mean, I had no interest. I had very little interest in, I was a fan of Star Trek, the TV series, because Star Trek was well written. And it was, the stories was fantastic, right? There's not a lot of special effects. It's all acting. It's all William Shatner. Because we must. Scotty, I can't give you impulse power, Captain, because the antimatter reactor is down. It used to be the Star Trek, the Enterprise used to be antimatter. I don't know if you guys remember that, antimatter. Years later, it became nuclear. It became nuclear power. The original was better. Antimatter reactor especially in the new movies, it's all nuclear powered. Nuclear reactor. So I was, 2005, I get contacted by these physical beings. And they say, well, we can't. We want to communicate with you, but you have to deal with these blocks. And that's what began. Okay, I said to myself, I will go and figure this out. I will find out what they want, and then I'll get on with my life. To me, it was a nuisance, right? Because they keep bothering me, and it's very disturbing. I went and dealt with that issue, and that awakening process. I went to see a psychic, and there was an awakening process where I realized all of these things that I'd never thought about before. And in that room, there were several, ETs. And then my memory returned, and then I realized, well, I've been seeing these people since I was 3 years old. I never thought of them as aliens. I just thought of them as these people I knew, or these advanced. I never thought of them as aliens. I'm not a very. I don't really think of people in like a racial term. So these were different races, but I never thought of them. I thought of them as different races, but I didn't judge them because they were, gray-skinned or blue-skinned or whatever else. But that's part of the hobbling, right? I didn't think of it as alien. And then on television and movies, the aliens were like monsters. They were space monsters with acid blood, and they were scary, and they were killing people, and they were serial killers and homicidal maniacs, and they were murderers. So, well, those are aliens. These people I've been talking to for all these, they're just different. They're just, I don't know. I never thought of them as aliens. So when I went on the show, Mr. Hoagland started to focus on this experience with the elves. And when I say started to focus, he went into the minutia of this experience. So he would say, well, and what was the texture of their skin? And did they have two eyeballs? And, and what was your mood back then? They were tall, but how tall were they? Were they 5'8" or 6'2"? Were they all similar? So every question, if you listen to this interview, every question is just goes into the minutia of this one experience. What did they say? And what did they call themselves? Why did they come to see you? When they moved, did they move quickly or slowly? Now, I could see already in the beginning that Mr. Hoagland did not really respect me as somebody who knew anything. I'm not a scientist, had no degree in science, no PhD, no significant background in this business. And he would sometimes say, well, after half an hour, I guess we can accept that he knows something. He would say something like this, right? I haven't heard the interview for a while, but he would say stuff like, I guess he knows something. I guess we can accept him. He seems to know what he's talking. Like, he's trying to establish to his audience that I know something. Maybe he's not going to say he's an expert, but he's trying to establish that I'm not a fraud, and that even though I'm not a scientist, it's not my fault. Anyway, again, I had gone on. We had agreed to the talking points, subjects, and I've given them all the information, all the documents. I'd given them web addresses and photos. He had all that, but he was focused on this one particular experience. And you know, I knew, part of me knew it was kind of this test, but part of me was like, this is my first interview. I am so honored to have an interview. I've never dealt with an interview. I don't know. You know, you have to deal with certain types of questions and certain types of interviewers. I didn't have all that. At the time, I'm just this guy who's been talking by himself with all this great information. And I want to tell the audience something, and I have this bigger audience. I was so happy to be there. So I just went along with it because I wanted to see how far he would go. I wanted to see how far he would go with this, asking the same questions over and over about one experience. But I did, as the hour went on, I think it went on for about 90 minutes. So it's a 2-hour interview. It went on for 90 minutes. He kept talking about the same thing. And I just kept following along because I wanted to see, part of me wanted to see just how dumb this conversation is going to get. Right? He's keep asking the same thing. Maybe he's trying to make me look stupid, but I think this conversation is stupid. As an interviewer, you're supposed to. This is one of my big issues about that whole event, is that you invite people you respect. And the way he treated me, I didn't feel like he respected me. The way he questioned me, the way we repeated the same topic for an hour and a half. The fact that I never had radio or interview experience, I was in a vulnerable position. And he is an experienced interviewer, an experienced speaker. He's been in the game for many, many decades. So, but I decided, let's just see how stupid this will get. And it was pretty stupid. It went on for 90 minutes. And to me, I'm thinking, well, you're depriving the audience of all this information I have, all this knowledge I wanted to share. You're depriving them of that. We agreed to a certain subjects, which you asked for, which we've completely ignored. None of the subjects that I presented were even remotely considered. Nothing was even, never, like not the whole conversation. Nothing was covered. So to me, that was a disappointment because the audience didn't get that. By the 90-minute mark, I think after we came back from the break, I said he would say something like, "I guess we can, accept that, Mr. Tosin knows something." Something to this extent, right? Now, well, I guess so, right? I guess we can accept him into the brotherhood. And then we moved on to other subjects. But by then I was there's no time and I have so much to say. I was going really fast. And one of the reasons I wanted to get on the radio was to talk about this, my theory, and what I learned and what I understood was that the earth, the main cultures of the earth came from other systems. So the cultures of the planet immigrated or settled here from other star systems or planets, depending on your perspective, other galaxies, rather than the theory that, you know, we grew out of amoeba. The DNA evolution theory, we grew from amoeba into human beings. So my theory was, what I wanted to share with the audience was that my understanding at the time was that key cultures, the central cultures of the planet, right? You have the Persian and the Asian and the Caucasian and the African. Those key cultures, they came from other star systems and immigrated here. The Roman, you know, the Greek. And some of those cultures, you know, they proliferated and they replicated and they remained. And other cultures that came here, they left, right? And we know this. We know that cultures have left. We know that cultures have left because we know about the Mayan culture that's extinct, right? We know about various cultures that have left their civilization here. You look at the pyramids, that culture, the Aztecs, the Mayans. So there are cultures that have become extinct or have left. So when civilizations leave, other civilizations will arrive and they'll stay for a certain time and then they'll leave. And so the interview ended, and I didn't like the interview. I didn't feel good about it. But I was happy and thankful that he even considered me, because nobody else did. So he was progressive. He is a progressive person. But I don't think he respected me or what I said, and the interview didn't make me look good. And part of that was his fault, and part of that was my inexperience. And then some of the people who follow my work sent me comments, and then I think later on I wrote a blog and said, you know, I made a comment about the fact that he didn't do it right, and it wasn't fair, and we didn't talk about anything I had set out to talk about, which we had originally agreed to. And so then it was later, I think it was months later, where he invited me back. He's contacted me and says, "You want to come back?" And I thought about it. I said, okay, well, maybe this time we can get into something substantive. So I agreed to a second interview. Again, obviously it's because he felt guilty. Some level that he wasn't fair. But I went, well, I don't know. I'm speculating. But he wouldn't invite me back because I'm good. He wasn't inviting me again because I was good. Because I'm the same person. But so I went back, and again, we spent the first hour talking about the same thing. The same experience with the elves. Were they short? Were they tall? Did they say this? Did they say that? What do they want? What was their frequency? What was the color of the portal? And did you measure it? For the first hour. And after that hour, he says, well, I guess we can accept that you know something. It's always like, you know, he obviously doesn't respect me as a person of knowledge. And then we spent an hour. We had a reasonable discussion, I think, for an hour. But it wasn't, you know, why I prefer to talk is, you know, is because I have things I want to say and I just say it. And then people have the option whether they want to hear it or watch it or what to believe. Right? It's like you go to university and you sign up for a class and you can show up or not show up. But if you show up, you might learn something. And if you don't like that teacher, if you don't like that class, you don't go to that class. You don't go to that teacher. The university professors, we don't bring them on the radio and question them and critique them. We accept the fact that they're professors because they have knowledge. Doesn't mean they're good. What means they're good is if they can teach students and they learn something. So to me, I consider myself more of a teacher, and this is a class, and you can attend, you can watch it, it's free. What do you want? So that became my approach, rather than to do the radios and the interviews, which you get critiqued, you get attacked, but that kind of takes away from the education. I think of this as more of an education. I think of this knowledge. You can watch it and learn, or you can reject it, or you can discuss it with your friends. You can add it to your repertoire, or you can not watch it, shut it off. It's up to you. What's that? I'm making a video.
Can you show me out?
You get a camera and you record yourself.
No, but can you give me a shout out on your YouTube or something?
Get it.
42069.
Record yourself on video.
On that video?
No, on your video, and put it online.
No, can I get you to show me out when you're online?
Oh, I am. You don't want to be on mine.
I don't want to be on
No.
yours? What's yours about?
It's about weird stuff.
Yeah, I'm on JerkMake, by the way. JerkMake.com.
Okay, thanks. So where are we? So that was my first interview. Didn't go well. And later on, I was invited on to the Eye of Ra with Ra Castaldo, Ralph. Ra invited me on, and he had the podcast, and he was very open-minded. He was very respectful. We had a great discussion. He respected me as somebody with knowledge. Whether he agreed with 100%, whether or not, it's irrelevant. You're invited. Let's ask you a question. Let's treat you with respect. He was very respectful. He's a great guy. The Eye of Ra. He has his show, and he invited me on 2 or 3 times, and we had a nice discussion. That's the thing for me is you invite people, you show them some respect. If you get invited somewhere and the person doesn't respect you, I would say don't go. If I had known that my knowledge wouldn't be respected, I wouldn't have gone. I would have canceled if I didn't feel I really had to say something and wait till the end of the interview, I would have left early. I would have cut off. If you're in this business and you get a chance to do an interview, go to people who respect you or show your respect. Doesn't mean they believe everything you say. That's not the point. Doesn't mean they agree with all of your ideas. The point is they ask intelligent questions. They respect you as a person. They respect your knowledge. And you have an interesting discussion. If they like you and you guys get along, you get invited back. I'm not bitter about the experience, again, because for me, well, it's an experience. It's a long time ago now. It's not the way it's not my sort of path. and whether later I do interviews or not. I think it all depends, you know, when the UFO topic eventually breaks out. You know, I may be doing something completely different. I have, you know, I have other things to talk about. The just as an ending point, extraterrestrials is just one subject. You know, and it's a great subject. It's not really even it's not really my main subject. But I've always felt it necessary to talk about these people because they're demonized on television and movies, and they're portrayed as space monsters and serial killers in space with acid blood, you know, homicidal maniacs, which they're not. They're very intelligent, and they're very advanced.